was really the best thing that ever happened to me.
Open questions about our dead.
I was married to him for 35 years.
Create open wounds for those still living.
That I had called multiple times to discuss these findings, and I was shut down.
Kim Wink is on a path no one would choose, following death's footsteps.
911, what is your emergency?
Go ahead, man. We have a medical aid off of Gates Canyon Road.
It was August 2020, on the front lines of the LNU wildfire complex.
Yeah, PG&E troubleman.
The troubleman was Steve Wink, a 37-year veteran of PG&E, and he was down on the front lines of a wildfire. The medics called for police to investigate.
It sounds like he died, and it was a PG&E worker.
Oh, no. Okay.
I guess deputies will be needed.
But those deputies from the Solano County Sheriff's Office didn't come.
Your husband dies at work,
Yes.
on the job.
Yes,
And the scene where that happened was not preserved.
correct,
It was not photographed.
correct,
It was not examined by any investigator.
correct.
That decision not to investigate touched off a cascading series of failures. Evidence vanished from the scene of Steve's death. And worse,
An Amazon package gets better tracking than my husband's body did that day.
Steve's body was taken out of Solano County and out of law enforcement custody,
And then they tried to cover it up.
leaving even less evidence to help determine what really caused his death. Steve Wink only had 8 hours left to live. He didn't know that when he shot this video. But he did know he was going in to a fire zone.
Right now, a fast-moving wildfire in Solano
The
County.
LNU lightning fire.
It just blew all the way through the hills in just no time.
The firefighters on the LNU complex were warned to be ready for a risky day. Bad weather, burned power poles, and trees falling down onto narrow, winding roads.
I mean, look at the wires. I mean, they're just so intertwining.
Like this road that Steve ended up on.
3200 Gates Canyon.
Alone. PG&E sent him out that day with no partner.
So I'm gonna park the same way Steve's truck was found.
A place that took Kim Wink more than half a year to find.
I still get emotional coming up here every time I come.
Searching for answers, Kim found a sign. It says, "No shooting." It also says, "This is the place." That sign shows up here, in the only 2 snapshots Kim had of the scene where her husband died, posted online by freelance photographer Paul Kuroda. He didn't see Steve die. Nobody did.
I was horrified when I got these pictures of my husband on the ground, getting CPR over Facebook. But how I feel about him now is it's a blessing. Because if I didn't have these pictures, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Kim started to question the official story of Steve's death as soon as she saw the damaged poles and wires, even before we uncovered the full picture, bringing more details into focus.
So there's damage to the truck.
Yes,
There's damage to your husband.
correct.
And they all call it
Natural,
as opposed to an accident.
correct.
Natural causes. Steve's death certificate looks the same as it would if he had died on his couch at home. Other contributing factors? None.
Kind of blaming him for it. They didn't even look into anything.
Because Steve died alone and at work, the job of investigating his death belonged to the sheriff of Solano County, who's also the coroner. Sheriff Tom Ferrara is up for re-election this year. He declined to stand by his department's work on camera, so we came down here to talk to him. We watched him get into an unmarked car with other people from the sheriff's office and take the back gate. No, they're going the other way. They're going the other way. Sheriff!
The mountain of missteps in this case all started here, when this agency failed to do what the paramedics asked: show up.
If you can get the proper law enforcement authorities, we'll be at Baca Valley soon.
Okay, so is it, what's PD for? What is for the work related? Is that what?
Work related, and it's a death out in the county.
Oh, he died.
Yeah.
The sheriff's office got the call.
It sounds like he died, and it was a PG&E worker.
Oh, no. Okay.
I guess deputies will be needed.
But deputies never came.
Failing to do an investigation. That's where it starts.
Lisa Murphy is a friend of Kim's who happens to have more than 2 decades of experience managing police training. She helped Kim to get records of what happened, including the voice of the sergeant in charge of patrol deputies in Solano County that day.
Well, we can send the coroners over there, right?
Yeah, I can give them a call and let them know.
Oh, well, they're going to have to go over there anyway, right?
It clearly reveals that there was a desire to have the coroner's office just handle everything so that deputies would not have to be dispatched over to the hospital.
The Solano Sheriff's Office points out it was busy at this time handling fire evacuations. Whatever the reason, there's no record of any deputy responding to the hospital for Steve's death, including the coroner's deputy who ended up with the case.
Hey, Monica, it's Dew.
Hey.
I was handling that industrial accident call.
Yeah.
If you will add a note to the file that it doesn't appear to actually be a work-related accident.
Okay.
How did coroner's deputy Jessica Dew decide that? According to her report, she'd only talked to one person on the phone about Steve's death. It was a hospital nurse who told her Steve had a prior heart attack and stent put in almost 2 decades ago. But Kim provided more recent records. Just 1 year before, Steve's cardiologist said his heart function was rock solid, and there is really no reason for concern.
Because he had, heart issues in the past, the sheriffs decided to just call off all investigation.
He wasn't working during the time?
He was working during the time, but the injury was not in relation to an accident he suffered from work. It appears his death was caused by natural causes.
Dew's report says she sent a van to the hospital to pick up Steve's body and bring him to the morgue. But the report left something out.
They let it happen without my knowledge, and then they tried to cover it up.
That van came back to the morgue the next day.
An Amazon package gets better tracking than my husband's body did that day.
Steve's body went on an undisclosed road trip.
Wow, they brought him all the way down here.
And we retraced it, almost 90 miles.
Being involved in Solano County law enforcement for 28 years, I had no idea any of this went on.
To this little-known facility in Contra Costa County.
They never asked for my consent. They took him down there that morning and took every bone out of his body. And the sheriff let that happen before the autopsy was done. And now when I look at his grave, he's not there. I only agreed to his corneas and some skin grafting.
On the night he died in 2020, Kim Wink was in the shower, reeling from the news when she got a call. Steve was a registered donor.
And they were going to go to the coroner's office that night to do it because it was time sensitive.
No one came to work on Steve Wink's body that night. But the next morning, his body took a journey to a place 42 miles away. There's no sign on the street.
This feels very surreal.
But head into this office park and you'll see Donor Network West, the nonprofit company that has legal authority over organ and tissue donation for most of Northern California.
Families do not know that their loved ones are being brought here from Fairfield.
Donor Network West told us it gets consent from family members to move bodies, but it wouldn't show us those records for Steve, even with Kim's written permission.
I would have never given my consent for him to leave Solano County.
Donor Network pointed out coroners have authority to halt donations when they need to protect death investigations, a power the Solano County coroner and sheriff didn't use before doing Steve's autopsy. That autopsy says Steve Wink had no injuries, but that was the day after Donor Network West cut parts from the body. And the Donor Network did find multiple injuries. They documented an abrasion or scraping on Steve's chest and a bruise to the back of his right knee. There's also damage in Steve's right eye. It had severe sloughing, which means some of the outer layer of Steve's cornea came off. And in this part of his eye, 2 pieces of glass debris. This evidence all disappeared. Donor Network West took both of Steve's eyes for donation. They also removed parts of Steve's skin, ligaments, tendons, both of Steve's upper arm bones, and both whole sets of leg bones, from his hips down to his ankles.
I don't quite know where to start.
We wanted to hear from an expert with no connection to Steve's case.
Okay, my name is Michael Doberson. I'm a physician. My specialty is forensic pathology.
Mike lives in Colorado, where he worked 21 years as a county coroner. He examined the dead in Columbine, the Aurora Theater shooting, and the 9/11 attacks. And he reviewed Steve Wink's death investigation for us.
I really thought this was so inadequately handled.
Mike says Steve's body should have been examined first by the coroner before the tissue donation. And he would have taken pictures of Steve's injuries.
Because it is a potential workplace accident.
A staffer from the Solano County Sheriff Coroner's Office was supposed to be present for the recovery procedure, according to county policy. There's no record of any staff member going. In fact, the whole day of Steve's tissue donation is missing.
You do not see August 20th on here at all.
That also violates policy, which says all steps of the tissue donation need to be thoroughly documented in the coroner's report to preserve and protect evidence in death investigations.
What the hell is going on here?
The body isn't the only evidence the Solano County Sheriff's Office allowed to slip away.
There's a saying in forensic pathology that the autopsy really starts at the scene.
There was about an hour window where he wasn't accounted for.
The scene where Steve Wink died was full of clues no investigator collected.
We would have had pictures from every angle. We would have interviewed the people at the scene.
Kim only had the 2 pictures from Facebook. The photographer's a freelancer who sells photos to news outlets. Paul Kuroda licensed his images to us.
I heard the tree crack behind me.
He would later tell deputies when that tree came down, so did the phone lines.
I saw the cable, that same cable, come down towards me too. So it just occurred.
This PG&E crew found Steve lifeless and alone before starting CPR. They didn't know what happened, but they did notice this key piece of evidence.
I perceived that the ladder rack, it got entangled and he didn't know it and ripped it off.
This ladder rack, bent and lying on the ground, came from the top of Steve's truck.
But it looked like it kind of got caught by that phone line or something right there.
PG&E wouldn't tell us whether it still has the ladder rack. Here's one in action. It's heavy, 8 feet long. A third PG&E employee would also later tell deputies he knew that it broke. Steve's mechanic.
But it was damaged, ripped off, like someone hit it with a tree. I mean, the bolts pulled through the holes and everything else.
You can see those bolts in the pictures sticking up from the top of Steve's truck.
So maybe it did get damaged up there.
It doesn't add up.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Mike Doberson says it is possible Steve's existing heart disease killed him, but if so, it could have been triggered by an injury or panic. And if not, some other trauma could have killed Steve.
There's a very strong possibility that something happened other than a natural disease process that led to his death.
Witnesses saw Steve's toolbox open. Kim later discovered damage to his wristwatch. She thinks he was out working and the phone lines whipped into him when the tree fell.
There was damage to the truck, right? Why not look at that and then go from there?
PG&E knew about the damage. Kim expected them to tell the authorities, but there's no sign they did. Cal OSHA found no violations in a report that doesn't mention any damage to Steve's truck, and the Solano Sheriff's Office never went to the scene.
I have called multiple times to just discuss these findings, and I was shut down.
They didn't start asking questions until Kim Wink finally got this meeting 7 months after Steve died.
There's no do-overs in this. I mean, the scene is gone.
His deputies owned up to a mishandled case.
I'll do my best to make at least what I can of it right for you.
But the sheriff himself, Tom Ferrara, refused multiple requests to answer our questions.
It's absolutely an industrial accident. Okay, and it should have been documented.
So why didn't the sheriff's office change Steve's death certificate to accidental causes, or even add the fact he died working on a wildfire? It's one of 17 questions the Solano Sheriff's Office wouldn't answer when we emailed to ask about our findings for this story. As for PG&E,
they have been ruthless to me. I've lost my husband. I've lost his income. I lost his pension. I lost my medical, dental, vision.
PG&E corporate refused to cooperate with the deputies looking into Steve's death. They wouldn't talk without a subpoena or search warrant. PG&E is familiar with search warrants. The PG&E Corporation has a criminal rap sheet. Guilty of 91 felonies in San Bruno and Paradise. PG&E also faces 4 new felony manslaughter charges for sparking the Zog fire the month after Steve Wink died.
This was a tragedy.
CEO Patty Poppy did more than deny those charges. She portrayed them as an attack, not on PG&E management, but on its 40,000 workers.
My co-workers are not criminals.
Workers like Steve Wink. His family is now asking the same question thousands of PG&E's crime victims have.
Who is policing PG&E?
The answer remains elusive. So does this one.
How did your husband die?
I don't know.
Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever know the answer.
And he worked 37 years for this company and died on the job. I don't think you would treat one of your own like that.
Kim Wink put blind faith in PG&E to do the right thing. She wishes her sheriff hadn't done the same.